I am really shocked by the way some unpatriotic Nigerians have gone on social media, misrepresenting IshowSpeed's visit to Nigeria and using it to project a negative image of their very own country, while attempting to spoil what was a good narrative of a very successful visit. First of all, IshowSpeed never said or implied that Nigeria is smelly. The young man perhaps achieved his most successful stream during his African tour in Nigeria, reaching a milestone of 50 million YouTube subscribers whilst in our dearly beloved country. He is the first black streamer to achieve that milestone, and it occurred in Nigeria, boosted by Nigerian subscribers appreciative of his visit. What these few unpatriotic Nigerians, who have a grudge against their own country, fed by a separatist agenda, have done is take a screenshot of a particular stream where Mr. Darren Jason Watkins Jr. made a face for a few seconds, which he often does all over the world, upon citing something interesting and peculiar. Using that snapshot, they painted a false narrative claiming that Lagos is smelly and that Darren Jason Watkins Jr., aka IshowSpeed, did not enjoy his time there and found nothing interesting or cultural to do. Sadly, their claims have gone wildly viral. In fact, as evidenced by his streams and media coverage, IshowSpeed had perhaps the most eventful moments of his Speed Does Africa tour in Nigeria, which is why he chose to spend his 21st birthday in our country. He drew his biggest crowds here and was so impressed by that he testified about it. He had gastronomical and cultural experiences, including visiting Freedom Park and eating the world-famous Nigerian jollof rice, which he raved about. Thereafter, he had a belated Dirty December moment by interacting with street dancers in a carnival-like manner, and had intermittent encounters and conversations with street performers, including a man whose physical strength he celebrated after attempting and failing to match his iron-bending skills. IshowSpeed also enjoyed Nigerian couture when he got to wear the special Nigerian hat, known as a fila, made in Nigeria entirely from made-in-Nigeria fabric. Something that I have been promoting worldwide. His decision to blend in culturally with Nigerians through fashion made him so excited that he asked street vendors and onlookers whether he looked Nigerian. And on his 21st birthday, IshowSpeed was surrounded by schoolchildren in their school uniforms, singing the famous Happy Birthday song to him, almost bringing him to tears. At Freedom Park, IshowSpeed interacted with various Lagos street performers, who taught the quick learner several dance steps particularly suited to the Nigerian music genre of Afrobeats that has taken the world by storm. IshowSpeed then visited the Nike Art Gallery in Lekki, where the management feted him and gifted him a traditional Lukumi Yoruba outfit, which left him in awe. Mr. Watkins next met Afrobeat singer Zlatan Ibile, who surprised him with a birthday cake, prompting IshowSpeed to shockingly reveal that was the first birthday cake he had ever received. Hard to believe, his time in Nigeria has become one of the most discussed pop culture moments of the year so far, and he was so pleased with Nigeria that one of the first things he did when he visited neighboring Benin Republic was to seek out Nigerians there to continue catching the fun that mesmerized him in Nigeria. Finally, it is not true that the streamer left Nigeria in a hurry after spending only a day in our beautiful country. The truth is that he has only 28 days to visit 20 African countries, and, other than South Africa, where he spent 3 days, he spent approximately 24 hours in each country. At the beginning of the tour, when he had more time, he spent more days in countries, but as the tour wore on and he observed the logistical challenges of visiting the proposed 20 nations, pragmatism forced him to allocate his time more prudently. In no other country did Mr. Watkins enjoy such an action-packed 24 hours, which is why he claimed he was a Nigerian, even saying he was likely Igbo, and named himself Emeka. From the above, it is clear that the narrative crafted by some unpatriotic Nigerians and blown out of proportion by fellow Africans who do not understand Pan-Africanism is nothing but a pathetic lie told by people who have already failed in their unfortunate attempts at setting the United States against Nigeria and are desperate to reignite their negative agenda for Nigeria after seeing the Trump administration cooperating with our great country instead of invading it.
bringing you the news in a more digital way.
Abubakar Malami, a former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation who was in office from November 2015 till May 2023 when the then President Muhammadu Buhari completed his 8 years tenure in office, under which courts of competent jurisdiction granted several detained Nigerians bail, but the Buhari government refused to release them and even rearrested some of them after they had perfected their bail conditions. The then Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, who was saddled with the responsibility of protecting citizens' rights, came out openly and apparently justified the violations of court orders by the then Buhari-led government, and during the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, Abubakar Malami frequently defended the actions of the government's refusal to obey court's orders of bail granted to high-profile individuals by asserting that national security and public interest superseded individual rights. Some of the high-profile individuals included Colonel Sambo Dasuki, the former National Security Advisor in the era of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, who was held for 4 years from December 2015 to December 2019. Despite being granted bail by at least 4 different Nigerian high courts and the ECOWAS court, he was repeatedly rearrested by the Department of State Services, DSS, immediately after fulfilling bail conditions. Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakaki and his wife Zina, detained from December 2015 until they were released in July 2021, were refused bail after federal court declared the detention illegal in 2016 and ordered their release by January 2017, but the government under which Abubakar Malami was a justice minister did not comply, until they were eventually acquitted of all charges by a Kaduna State High Court in 2021. Also, Omiyele Sowore, an activist and a journalist who is the founder of Sahara Reporters News Media, remained in DSS custody for several months in 2019 despite fulfilling bail conditions set by Justice Ijeoma Ojukwu. He was rearrested within the courtroom just 24 hours after a temporary release. Nnamdi Kanu, the convicted and jailed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB leader, was refused bail during his initial trial in 2015. President Buhari then publicly stated during a media chat that Kanu, among others, would not be allowed to go on bail due to the nature of their alleged crimes, despite court rulings. In addition, was Navy Captain Dada Labinjo, who was detained by the Nigeria military from September 2018 until at least late 2019, despite a federal high court order for his release, and during these periods, Abubakar Malami provided several justifications for these detentions. Most notably during his 2019 ministerial screening, Malami stated that the office of the AGF is meant to protect the public interest, and, where the individual interest conflicts with the public interest, the interest of 180 million Nigerians must naturally prevail. He cited the Supreme Court case of Asari Dokubo versus Federal Republic of Nigeria, arguing, it established that national security could supersede personal liberty in specific contexts, and when Dasuki and Sowore were finally released in December 2019, Malami claimed the government did so on compassionate grounds, and in compliance with court orders, while denying that international pressure from the United States, US influenced the decision. Currently, the then apparent defender and justifier of government disobedient to court orders is now calling on Nigerians and begging them to help him get justice, since the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, kept him in custody against court order that he had said earlier granted him bail, and after perfecting his bail conditions, he was rearrested by the DSS, and since he has remained in detention. According to Mohammed Bello Doka, Special Assistant on Media to Abubakar Malami, the office of Abubakar Malami, SAN, expresses grave concern over a series of actions by state agencies, which, taken together, amount to a deliberate attempt to frustrate his constitutional right to fair hearing and effective legal defense. Following charges filed by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, the Federal High Court granted Mr. Malami bail. However, the EFCC delayed the submission of his international passports to the court for about 1 week, despite the passports being a key condition for the perfection of bail. This delay unnecessarily prolonged his detention and obstructed the execution of a valid court order. Immediately after Mr. Malami eventually perfected his bail and was released from Kuje Custodial Center, he was rearrested by the Department of State Services, DSS. He was thereafter detained for 5 days without access to his lawyers or family, and was only allowed to meet his legal team on Friday after prolonged isolation, delays, and grave violations of his fundamental human rights. This detention occurred at a critical time when Mr. Malami was required to prepare and open his defense in an EFCC interim forfeiture proceeding before the Federal High Court. Denying him access to counsel during this period directly impaired his ability to consult, prepare filings, and give instructions, amounting to a clear frustration of due process. This sequence of events clearly suggests a pattern where arrest precedes investigation, with evidence sought after detention, an approach that is a blatant violation of the rule of law and constitutionally guaranteed rights. It is deeply troubling that the DSS appears to be adopting a similar practice of arrest, detention, and then evidence gathering. The office stresses that bail granted by a court must have meaning. No agency should be permitted to neutralize judicial orders through coordinated delays, rearrests, or denial of access to legal representation. Such actions undermine the authority of the courts and pose a serious threat to fundamental human rights. Mr. Malami remains ready to defend himself fully in court and in accordance with the law, and calls on all state institutions to respect court orders, constitutional guarantees, and the rule of law. In earlier press releases issued by Mohammed Bello Doka, Special Assistant on Media to Abubakar Malami, SAN in December 2025, the Office of Abubakar Malami, SAN, former Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, formally alert the Nigerian public and the international community to the brazen, contemptuous, and lawless conduct of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, in its handling of matters concerning Mr. Malami, following the clear and unequivocal court order granted by the High Court of the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, on the 23rd of December 2025, admitting Abubakar Malami, SAN, to bail on already fulfilled conditions. Officials of the EFCC were formally served with the court process. Rather than comply with the authority of the court, the Commission refused to accept the court-backed letter, chased away the bailiff, and insisted on the continued detention of Mr. Malami in blatant defiance of the law. This conduct represents nothing short of institutional lawlessness. The EFCC, an agency created by statute and bound by the Constitution, has chosen to elevate itself above the courts, arrogating to itself powers it does not possess and treating binding judicial orders with open disdain. More troubling is the fact that, despite revoking bail and detaining Mr. Malami for over 14 days, the EFCC has failed, refused, or neglected to arraign him before any court of competent jurisdiction. This prolonged detention without arraignment is illegal, unconstitutional, and oppressive, and amounts to a gross violation of Mr. Malami's fundamental rights. It is worthy of note that the EFCC is currently detaining Abubakar Malami, SAN, solely on the strength of a High Court order that permitted his detention for a maximum period of 14 days, an order which expires today. Even without regard to the separate bail granted by another High Court of competent jurisdiction, the EFCC was legally obligated to either release him immediately or arraign him before a court today. It has done neither. This deliberate inaction is a further and damning confirmation of the EFCC's vendetta, its blatant disregard for the rule of law, and its dangerous descent into tyranny and abuse of power. Rather than submit itself to due process, the EFCC has instead embarked on an orchestrated media trial, feeding selective narratives to the press in a deliberate attempt to poison public opinion, destroy reputations, and secure convictions in the court of public sentiment after failing to do so in a court of law. This is a dangerous abuse of power and a direct assault on the principles of justice, fairness, and the rule of law. The Commission's actions leave no doubt that it has abandoned its statutory mandate and allowed itself to be deployed as a tool of political persecution. When an anti-corruption agency begins to disobey court orders, detains citizens indefinitely, and weaponize the media, it ceases to be an instrument of justice and becomes a threat to democracy itself. We remind the EFCC that court orders are not suggestions. They are binding commands of the law. Selective obedience to judicial authority is the clearest pathway to anarchy, and Nigeria must not be allowed to descend into a state where security agencies choose which laws to obey and which to ignore. Abubakar Malami, San, has repeatedly stated his readiness to submit himself fully to due process and to have any allegation determined strictly by a court of law. What he rejects, rightly so, is trial by detention, trial by media, and trial by political vendetta. The office of Abubakar Malami, San, therefore calls on the judiciary to take urgent notice of this open contempt of court, relevant oversight bodies to hold the EFCC accountable for its serial violations of the law, and Nigerians of conscience to speak out against the dangerous precedent being set by the Commission's actions. No agency, no matter how powerful, is above the law. The office of Abubakar Malami, San, reiterates that the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, and its legal representatives have been properly served with the order of the Honorable Court. A day after the order was issued, the court bailiff, Mr. Abiodun Kolawole, attempted service on the EFCC, which refused to receive the order. This refusal does not negate service nor diminish the authority of the court. Later that same evening, the office of Okitepa, San, received the court order, conclusively establishing notice and awareness on behalf of the EFCC. Meanwhile, Omiyele Sowore had said he will never support extrajudicial measures against anyone. I urge the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission to obey the court order granting bail to former Nigerian Attorney General, Abubakar Malami, San. That said, we must also speak honestly about the despicable conduct of the Muhammadu Buhari and the Malami who governed with arrogance and impunity, acting as though there would be no tomorrow and no accountability for their actions. In 2019, after 4 months of detention under the Muhammadu Buhari regime, I was granted bail, but Abubakar Malami, San and the useless DSS DG Yusuf Bichi demanded that my sureties appear at the DSS office for profiling, a request I refused to comply with.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.
Nigeria military authority has confirmed the death of 5 soldiers and 1 police officer in an ambush launched by terrorists on Monday at Gidan Wagni area of Zamfara state. The incident may be a reminder of incessant cases of high rates of Nigeria losing its soldiers and other security operatives in ambush, especially as observed as a worsening situation in the year 2025, with the ambush of army barracks and killing of the men of the Armed Forces of Nigeria, AFN by terrorists in large number began as early as January 2025. It may be recalled that in January 2025, terrorists launched an attack on the 149 Battalion in Malami, Borno State, leading to the killing of over 20 military personnel, including a battalion commander and senior officers. Within the first quarter, a careful review of news reports showed that more than 100 Nigeria soldiers were reportedly killed in the first quarter of 2025 by terrorists mostly in ambush. In June 2025, terrorists' attacks on 3 army bases in central and northwestern Nigeria resulted in the killing of at least 17 soldiers. And in September 2025, a major ambush on the Baga-Maiduguri road was reported, where at least 40 soldiers were killed and 65 went missing. While in October 2025, at least 4 soldiers were killed in a Boko Haram ambush in Borno State, while another encounter in Kumshe resulted in 1 soldier killed, and by November 2025, the Nigerian army confirmed the death of Brigadier General Musa Uba and 2 other soldiers following an ambush by ISWAP terrorists near Wajiroko town in Borno State, which some local media reported that several soldiers were killed during the ambush. Even some of the local media stated that those who escaped the ambush, like the Brigadier General, were traced and killed by the terrorists apparently after hours of no rescue or prompt reinforcement by the Nigeria military authority. According to Captain David Adewasi, the media information officer of Operation Fansanyama. The 5 soldiers and the police officer were killed while the troops were returning from a successful operation and responding to a distress call of terrorists' attack in a community in Zamfara state. In his words, Captain David Adewusi said, "Troops of Operation Fansanyama, OPFY, Joint Task Force Northwest, have demonstrated exceptional bravery, professionalism, and resilience following a terrorist ambush along the Bingi-Keken-Waje-Gusau Road in Zamfara State on the 19th of January 2026. The ambush followed a series of successful offensive operations conducted from 17 to the 19th of January 2026, when troops of Sector 2 OPFY, in conjunction with the OPFY Mobile Strike Team and DIA Tactical Support Team, carried out coordinated raids, ambushes, and fighting patrols across Bernan Magaji and Anka areas of Zamfara state. During these operations, 3 suspects, Isia Kwakwatawa, Ibrahim Dan Musulu, and Makau Lambagoma, were arrested, while 4 terrorists were neutralized and others fled into the forest. Items recovered included 1 PKT machine gun, 5 AK-47 rifles, 3 AK-47 magazines. Other items are rounds of 7.62 mm special ammunition, Baofeng radios, 3 motorcycles. While returning from these operations and responding to a distress call on a terrorist reprisal attack, troops of OPFY Combat Team 1 came under attack by terrorists at Gidan Wagni while en route to Keken-Waje. Despite the surprise of the ambush, the troops responded gallantly, engaging the terrorists and preventing further harm to nearby communities. Regrettably, 5 soldiers and 1 police officer paid the supreme sacrifice during the encounter. Upon receipt of the distress report, the OPFY Mobile Strike Team, in conjunction with troops of 1 Brigade Quick Reaction Force from forward operating bases Karnoma and Keken-Waje, swiftly mobilized to the scene. The reinforcement was personally led by the Commander 1 Brigade, underscoring the high level of coordination and commitment within the operation. The combined force mounted a robust counter-ambush which forced the terrorists to withdraw, with credible intelligence indicating that notorious bandits Kingpin January and Alhaji Bello, the 2 IC to Kachala soldiers, seriously injured during the encounter, and some of the fleeing elements sustained gunshot injuries. Troops, supported by community vigilantes, subsequently conducted pursuit while further exploitation and offensive operations continued. Operation Fansanyama assures the public that the situation is under control and remains fully committed to protecting lives and properties of innocent citizens while sustaining pressure on terrorist elements and restoring lasting peace across the joint operations area. The theater commander has condoled with Commander Sector 2 on this loss and further commended the troops for their courage, sacrifice, and professionalism. Additionally, he encouraged members of the public to remain calm and continue to support ongoing security efforts through timely and credible information. The military press release ends in quotes.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way. Bringing you the news in a more digital way.